founding trustees. In 2000, he founded Boston's Stewart Street Playhouse, and from 2007 until 2010, he served as executive director of Massachusetts Film Office. Under his leadership, the Film Office attracted to the Commonwealth more than $1 billion of new direct spending on film and television production. Mr. Paleologos is a cum laude graduate of Tufts University and holds a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University. Please join me in welcoming our commencement speaker, Mr. Nicholas Paleologos.
So I know what you're thinking. Rutgers got Obama. You're stuck with. Thank you, President Hushman, Dean Paston, Dean Arnold, distinguished trustees and faculty, friends and family of this awesome class of 2016. I first want to acknowledge the huge debt of gratitude we owe to Henry Rowan, who passed away in December. This son of Ridgewood shocked the world in 1992 by making the largest gift ever, $100 million, not to MIT, where he got his degree, but to a little-known New Jersey public college that was founded in the same year that he was born. Mr. Rowan's enduring legacy to the university that now bears his name not only made today possible for you, but stands as a perpetual challenge to us, never to forget the importance of public higher education to the future of this country. Henry Rowan was part of what has come to be known as the greatest generation. One by one, these parents of baby boomers are passing away. My dad was one of them. When I was a kid, I had no idea of what life was like for him when he was a kid. Dad's parents fled a civil war in Greece to make a new life in America, specifically in Lowell, Massachusetts, during the Great Depression. He and his family grew up in a 3-story tenement with no hot water. On his first day of school, he didn't speak a word of English. Dad passed away a couple of years ago, and like so many of my fellow baby boomers who've lost their parents, I think about him a lot. I think about the country he left me and the country I'm leaving to my 3 millennials. Dad was 9 years old when Franklin Roosevelt was elected president. Unemployment was 25%. 2 million Americans were flat out homeless. And every bank in 32 of 48 states had slammed the doors shut on their depositors. Even so, in his first inaugural address, Roosevelt reassured the nation that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Roosevelt didn't waste any time. The country had work that needed to be done, and there were millions of jobless citizens willing to do it. So the president started the Civilian Conservation Corps. My dad lied about his age to get into the CCCs and was immediately put to work at a state forest up in Vermont, where he earned $1 a day, most of which went home to his mother, my immigrant grandmother. Not surprisingly, when Roosevelt sounded the call to arms in December of 1941, my father was only too happy to return the favor by heading off to the Pacific to fight in World War II. When the war ended, Dad stepped off the PT boat proud and penniless, with just his service dress blues and the brain in his head. At that moment, Roosevelt could have given Dad a pat on the back and sent him home to the hard-scrabbled streets of Lowell. But the president had something else in mind for my father: college. Not just for Dad's benefit, but for America's. And it didn't matter to Roosevelt that Dad couldn't afford it. The president insisted that the country pay for Dad's college education. Under the GI Bill, Arthur Paleologos, together with 8 million of his fellow veterans, went to colleges, vocational schools, got low-interest mortgages and loans to buy homes and start businesses, and all they did in return was create the great American middle class. Franklin Roosevelt died in 1945, but I grew up in the America that he built, a country that could send my dad to college, build an interstate highway system, put a man on the moon, and most important, a country where both Dad's income and his boss's increased at roughly the same pace. Because everybody paid their fair share of taxes, because the banks weren't allowed to gamble away Dad's savings, and because government raised mostly enough money to pay for the programs that people wanted. That country started disappearing when I was in my late 20s. I just didn't know it at the time. A new president, Ronald Reagan, in his first inaugural address, took dead aim at Roosevelt's America. Government, he famously declared, is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem. And for the next 3 decades, with precious little pushback, America did a complete 180. The higher your income, the lower your tax rate. The harder you work, the more you produce, the less you keep for yourself and your family. Corporations are your friends, the government is your enemy. Until everything came crashing down right around the time you started high school. For those of you who are fans of Frank Capra's classic film, It's a Wonderful Life, imagine falling asleep in 1978 in Bedford Falls and waking up 30 years later in Pottersville. Just like in that movie, the great American dream of the great American middle class was built on the solid foundation of home ownership. Until one day, literally the value of all of those homes, trillions of dollars, was wiped out overnight. But by the way, Muslims didn't do that. Mexicans didn't do that. Wall Street did. But you already know that. How could you not? You're graduating right smack in the middle of a huge national argument over the role of government, which is a little strange when you think of it, because the Declaration of Independence right up front tells us that the role of government is self-evident, namely, to secure your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That last one, the pursuit of happiness, that one's been the subject of every presidential election since my father was 9 years old. Believe it or not, every 4 years since 1932, the same 2 people have been on the ballot for president. They just had different names and different faces, but if you look very closely, you'll see it's always been the same choice between 2 very different visions for America: Roosevelt's and Reagan's. Roosevelt believed that the best way for government to secure your right to the pursuit of happiness was to, as much as possible, remove fear from your life. For Roosevelt, fear makes us less productive citizens, less likely to take risks, less entrepreneurial, less forward-looking. Roosevelt believed that a basic prerequisite for the pursuit of happiness in America is freedom from fear. In Reagan's America, fear is a motivator. Fear of losing your job or of getting sick or of being destitute in your old age. All of that fear makes us work harder, makes us more productive. And at the end of the day, if we still can't afford the cost of staying healthy or educating our kids, well, that's our fault, not our country's. For Roosevelt, fear is bad, fear holds us back. For Reagan, fear is good, fear moves us forward. For 30 years, my generation basically bought into the fear is good argument. Now we see things a little differently. Maybe it's because we've lost our jobs or our homes or our pensions or our ability to pay for our kids' education. Maybe it's because billions of dollars in profits aren't showing up in our paychecks anymore. Instead, they're paying for 30-second commercials designed to convince us that money is speech and corporations are people, and the craziest one of all, that wealth should be taxed at a lower rate than work. Speaking of fear, this year, I guess, we're supposed to be afraid of immigrants. That one really kills me. For heaven's sake, God Bless America was written by a Jewish immigrant who fled persecution in Russia in the 1890s. His name was Israel Isidore Baleen. You know him by his American name, Irving Berlin. Which brings me to the story of a young Hispanic couple who grew up in New York City in the 1990s. They first met at Hunter College High School. She was a sophomore, a math whiz, a great dancer, very opinionated. He was a senior, a theater nerd who performed in almost every school play, and he always carried a boombox around with him. He noticed her in high school, but never quite got up the courage to talk to her. After graduation, he went off to Wesleyan College, where he picked right up where he left off, writing and directing and acting in a bunch of college shows ranging from musicals to Shakespeare. He also found time to start an improvisational comedy troupe. After getting his degree from Wesleyan, he went back to his old high school and he worked as a 7th grade English teacher. By that time, she had already graduated from high school and she was well on her way to a bachelor's degree at Henry Rowan's alma mater, MIT, which eventually led to a pretty good job as a scientist at Johnson & Johnson in Skillman, New Jersey. While she was at J&J, he moved into an apartment with some friends. His improv group was making a name for itself, plus he was writing lyrics on the subway and performing at bar mitzvahs to pay the rent. Then in the summer of 2005, while catching up with fellow Hunter graduates on Facebook, he came across her profile. He sent her an instant message inviting her to his next show. She showed up and was pretty impressed. Still, he was so shy around her that he had to ask a friend to get her phone number. Then he called her and invited her to another show. And yes, she showed up a second time, but this time, after the show, they discovered that Hunter College High School and their Hispanic heritage wasn't all they had in common. There was also Grand Theft Auto, Jay-Z, Mark Anthony. That night, he told her about how, as a 7-year-old kid growing up in Washington Heights, he saw his first Broadway show, Les Mis, and he fell in love with the theater. He told her about how on his 17th birthday he saw Rent, which changed his entire view about how theater can speak to the real lives of people. So it wasn't long before the couple became not only best friends, but fixtures in each other's lives. And then lightning struck. He scored the starring role in a Broadway show, a lifelong dream. She quit her job at J&J to go to Fordham University to pursue a newfound passion of hers, the law. In 2010, the couple had a storybook wedding. At their reception, he and his family surprised her with a heartfelt flash mob rendition of To Life, that great production number from Fiddler on the Roof. And yes, this Jewish story of family and tradition resonated deeply with these second-generation Latinos. You can see it for yourself on YouTube. Their wedding video went viral. But I'm telling you their story for a different reason. A few years before they got married, he decided to take some time off from his 8-performance-a-week Broadway schedule to coincide with her semester break from law school. He was making decent money at the time, and he decided to treat her to a vacation in Mexico. At the airport terminal, he bought a book that happened to catch his eye. He started reading it on the plane, and he couldn't put it down. When she asked him to explain to him exactly what was it about this 700-page historical biography that so captivated his imagination, it literally took him a year to answer that question in his own words. These words: how does a bastard, orphan, son of a whore and a Scotsman, dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean by Providence, impoverished in squalor, grow up to be a hero and a scholar? The $10 founding father without a father got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a lot smarter, by being a self-starter. By 14, they placed him in charge of a trading charter. And every day while slaves were being slaughtered and carted away across the waves, he struggled and kept his guard up. Inside, he was longing for something to be a part of. The brother was ready to beg, steal, borrow, or barter. Then a hurricane came and devastation reigned. Our man saw his future dripping down the drain, put a pencil to his temple, connected it to his brain, and he wrote his first refrain, a testament to his pain. Well, the word got around. They said, this kid's insane, man. Took up a collection just to send him to the mainland. Get your education. Don't forget from whence you came. And the world's going to know your name. What's your name, man? Alexander Hamilton. That's right. Just last month, for writing those words, which became the opening rap of his theatrical masterpiece, Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda won the 2016 Pulitzer Prize for Drama. And last week, Hamilton earned 16 Tony Award nominations, the most ever. But it was the story of Alexander Hamilton, the immigrant, that first touched Miranda's heart. He said, I recognize people I know in Alexander Hamilton. Not only my father, who came here at the age of 18 from Puerto Rico, but also stories of so many other immigrants who have to work twice as hard to get half as far. For Miranda, Alexander Hamilton's immigrant story opened the door to something much, much bigger. The story of the creation of our country. I had to make the founding fathers human for myself, he said. And I think what is touching a nerve is other people are finding the humanity within them as well. Hamilton is so much more than Broadway's first hip-hop rap musical. It is a game-changing piece of theater. Today, that couple, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and his wife, Vanessa Nadal, have an 18-month-old son. Miranda is now 36 years old, and he is the latest in a long line of first and second generation American songwriters who've shaped the way we see ourselves, and that line stretches all the way back to Irving Berlin. Miranda discovered one more important revelation in that Hamilton biography. The ideological fights of the founders, he said, are the same fights we are having today. What is the role of government in our lives? I'm slightly ashamed to admit that my father's generation answered that question a whole lot better than my own. For some reason, we contracted an acute case of American amnesia, where the lessons that our parents learned from the Great Depression were first ignored and then ultimately forgotten by us. Well, now it's your turn. You are graduating into a country where the fundamental assumptions that my father lived by simply don't apply anymore. In Dad's America, Kodak, the great camera company, at its peak, was valued at more than $30 billion and employed 145,000 people. In your America, Instagram is also valued at over $30 billion, and they employ 13 people. You live in a country where less and less work is required to create more and more wealth. In trying to figure out the appropriate relationship between wealth and work in the new America, you get to say what the pursuit of happiness means for your generation. You have the opportunity to reimagine your country as a place where people work not just to make a living, but to make a life worth living. Getting to that place will require a whole lot of creative thinking. Along the way, beware of folks trying to distract you with terrifying tales of Muslims under your mattress. And remember that while the names and faces and parties change, your choice will always be the same: hope or fear. And I don't know about you, but I tend to do very stupid things when I'm scared to death. Each one of you came to Rowan blessed with special gifts, which you developed and sharpened here. You are artists. You look at things that everybody else looks at, and you see things that nobody else sees. That unique ability to see truth and communicate it in ways that touch people's souls is what makes the artist the single most important person in any successful and prosperous democracy. America wants you to be the best artist you can be. America needs you to be the best citizen artist you can be. Me? I just want you to be consequential. Look around, how lucky you are to be alive right now. History is happening, and history has its eyes on you. Congratulations.